Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something wild. We're going to use ancient funerary texts to map out the terrifying, bizarre, and utterly wondrous ancient Egyptian underworld. If you thought the afterlife was just about, resting in peace, well, you are in for a wild ride. We're going to decode the geography, the deities, and the ultimate trials of the dead. All right, so let's set the scene. The Duat, which was sometimes called Teswanet or Amenthis, wasn't just some simple graveyard or a dark empty void. Not at all. It was an incredibly complex, vibrant, and dangerous realm. Think of it as a parallel dimension right beneath the earth, housing both the deceased and a whole pantheon of powerful deities. The ancient Egyptians actually believed that the burial chambers on the west bank of the Nile were literal touching points, physical doorways connecting our mundane world directly to the Duat. You didn't just die and vanish, you entered this highly active territory that absolutely required a guidebook to navigate.
Consider this explainer your ultimate survival map. Here's our agenda for today. 1. Journey into the Duat. 2. Meet the underworld deities. 3. The ultimate soul test. 4. Ra's nightly voyage. And 5. Surviving the afterlife. Let's kick things off with Section 1, Journey into the Duat.
To help human souls wrap their heads around this realm, ancient texts describe the Duat using familiar earthly features like rivers, islands, and dirt paths. But right alongside those familiar things, you'd suddenly hit these bizarre, mystical barriers. I mean, picture this. You're walking down a path, and your way is suddenly blocked by literal lakes of fire, massive, impassable walls made of solid iron, or these stunning, glowing trees made entirely of turquoise. It was a landscape practically designed to test you, often referred to as the hidden place, a secret road completely separate from the mortal realm.
Now, to bring some kind of order to all that chaos, this dark land, often called the Beyond or Shittentit, was strictly partitioned by 12 heavily guarded gates, and that number 12 is absolutely critical. Each of these gates represented a specific hour of the night. You couldn't just wander aimlessly through the Duat, you had to pass sequentially through these 12 regions, dealing with the unique hazards and guardians stationed at every single gate. It was literally a 12-hour endurance run through the dark. Which brings us to Section 2, Meet the Underworld Deities.
If you were going to make it through, you absolutely had to know your primary underworld contacts by name. First up, we have Osiris. He's the ultimate lord of the realm, famously depicted with green skin and wrapped in bandages, completely personifying rebirth after being slain by his brother Seth. Next is Anubis, the iconic jackal-headed god. He's the one who actually guides your soul and operates the scales of justice. Right beside him is Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe acting as the official court stenographer, writing down your final verdict. And finally, sitting terrifyingly at the bottom of the roster, is Ammit. She is the devourer. We're talking a nightmare hybrid with the face of a crocodile, the mane of a lion, and the backside of a hippopotamus. She is the executioner you desperately want to avoid. All right, moving on to Section 3, the ultimate soul test. So the real crux of this whole journey is this intense sequential ritual where your immortal soul literally hangs in the balance. It's a high-stakes courtroom drama. Step 1. You had to stand before a jury of 42 assessors of Ma'at and address each and every one of them correctly by name. Step 2 is the negative confession. You didn't confess what you did wrong. Instead, you had to loudly proclaim all the specific sins you did not commit in your life. Step 3 is the famous weighing of the heart. Anubis takes your heart, which they believed was the seat of your soul and intellect, and physically weighs it on a scale against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and order. If your heart was heavy with sin, it sank. Which leads us to Step 4. If you pass, paradise. If you fail, Ammit the Devourer steps right in.
And this creates a massive contrast to our modern expectations. When we think of the underworld today, we usually picture the Abrahamic concept of hell, right? A place where wicked souls are condemned to fiery torment and just eternal, ongoing suffering. But the ancient Egyptian concept was entirely different. If you failed the way in and Ammit ate your heart, you didn't suffer forever. You simply ceased to exist. Poof, gone. The ultimate ancient Egyptian punishment was the absolute denial of an afterlife. For a culture that was so heavily focused on eternity and legacy, total annihilation was literally the most terrifying fate imaginable. Next up, Section 4, Ra's nightly voyage. Because here's the thing, the Duat wasn't just a testing ground for mortal souls. It served a massive cosmic purpose. Every single night after the sun set in the human world, the sun god Ra traveled across a subterranean river on his barge. In Hour 1, he enters the West as this exhausted, dying old man named Atum. And as he travels through the underworld, he doesn't just cruise along, he has to fight for his life. Around midnight, he engages in this epic, world-saving battle against Apep, a giant serpent personifying darkness and true chaos. By defeating Apep, Ra ensures that the universe itself continues. Finally, by Hour 12, he emerges in the east, totally transformed into the young, revitalized scarab god Khepri, ready to dawn as the new morning sun.
Honestly, what I find incredibly poetic is the side effect of Ra's nightly commute. As Ra passed through the different hours of the Duat and his ram-headed form, his glorious, illuminating rays briefly woke the dead who were resting in that specific sector. For just that one single hour, the deceased were revivified. They got to stand in the light of the sun god, enjoy the afterlife, and actually feel alive again, before returning to their slumber to wait for his return the very next night. It's just a beautiful, rhythmic view of eternity.
And finally, Section 5, Surviving the Afterlife. The ancient Egyptians did not leave any of this to chance. No way. They prepared for this incredible journey by burying their dead with highly specific texts: the Book of the Dead, the Coffin texts, the Book of Gates, and the Amduat. These weren't just religious scriptures to them. They acted as literal cheat codes and survival maps. They contained the exact spells, the passwords, the names of the guardians, and the routes you needed to bypass all of the Duat's dangers. Having these texts inscribed on your tomb walls or tucked into your coffin was basically the equivalent of bringing a fully loaded GPS device into the afterlife.
And if you followed the guidebook perfectly, and your heart was found to be as light as a feather, well, here was your reward. Aru, also known as the Field of Reeds. It was the ultimate, pain-free paradise. The texts describe it as an idealized version of Egypt itself. A land of eternal spring where the harvests never failed, there was absolutely no sickness, and you could spend eternity reunited with your loved ones, basically living out your best former life forever.
The sheer visual power of this ancient, incredibly detailed map of the afterlife is so endearing that the Duat continues to heavily influence our modern storytelling even today. We see these exact same underworld mechanics popping up in blockbuster video games like Assassin's Creed Origins. They drive the plot of Marvel series like Moon Knight, where characters are literally guided by Tauret, and they've inspired authors from Rick Riordan to William S. Burroughs. The human fascination with mapping the unknown beyond death hasn't faded one bit in thousands of years.
Which leaves us with a fascinating, kind of provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. The ancient Egyptians spent their entire lives studying, writing, and preparing an incredibly detailed, step-by-step manual to ensure they survived the journey beyond the grave. They literally mapped out the unmappable. So as our own world rapidly changes, with all of our modern technology and shifting beliefs, how would a modern guide to the afterlife look? What passwords and guides would you want written on your walls? Thank you so much for exploring the Duat with me today. Keep asking questions and keep exploring.